How's everyone today? Thank you for joining in to see our great presentation by Michelle today. As people trickle in, I just want to start off with an icebreaker. So Michelle, please tell me if you have any travel plans coming up.
Yes. In fact, I'm going to Spain. So pretty excited about that. Yes. Going to Spain in June.
Amazing. Are you a big fan of tapas and wine and all that?
I have not been as much of a big tapas fan, but I think I'll be a convert after spending 8 days in Spain. So that's my
Oh,
hope.
8 days. That's a good amount. I've been to Barcelona and it's one of my favorite cities in the
Yeah,
world. So
it's
you're going to
beautiful.
absolutely love it. And it's going to be great weather. And now that travel is back on, I'm really excited to also travel as well. So it's
Yes.
great to
Yes.
hear. I'm in SF right now. I'm originally from Toronto, and it's really nice to get to head over to meet the MSP team in person.
Mhm.
It's been a year full of remote, so I'm really glad that travel is back on the
Excellent.
books for a lot of people. Awesome. So I think more people are trickling in. Today, again, we're going to be talking about sales coaching, what it is, what it isn't, and what it could be, sponsored by our sponsor, Vantage Point Performance. And we have our very own Michelle Vazana.
Mhm.
Yep. That will go over in this hour an amazing masterclass on sales coaching. So again, my name is Angelica, and I am the Community Event Manager at Modern Sales Pros. And I'm making sure that everyone gets the most of our session today. We have our Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder at Vantage Point Performance, who is going to be sharing her methodology behind her extensive research into sales management coaching and practices. But before we go any further, I'm going to talk about the amazing community at Modern Sales Pros. And for those who are not familiar with MSP, it is one of the largest revenue leadership community leaders in sales management, sales and revenue operations, and sales development. And for those who are not part of the community, we have access to live sessions like the one you're about to experience today through our online robust forum and in-person events now that in-person events are happening again. And if you would like to join the community, feel free to drop a note to Gina at Modern Sales Pro HQ. And as I mentioned, we have in-person events coming back up. So if you like the content that you see today, we have our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit happening April 12th through the 14th. And we pull together 11 events of amazing content and speakers. You'll hear from revenue leaders at Drift, Lean Data, Dialpad, Figma, Atrium, and more. I'm actually going to add in the registration link right here if you would like to save your spot. It's going to be a great event next month. And some last but not least, before I pass it off to our amazing sponsor, I am going to mention some housekeeping notes. I know we're all excited to dive in, but I wanted to mention that we do have a Q&A chat function at the top where you'll see chat poll Q&A. So feel free to ask any questions to Michelle and she'll be sure to answer it live in this session today. And we also have some really fun interactive polls throughout. So be sure to add in your selections for your poll. And of course, this session, it will be recorded, so you'll be able to access the recording post-event and key takeaways. So if your colleague wasn't able to join today, they'll have access to the recording afterwards. So enough about the housekeeping and MSP. I am pleased to introduce our sponsor, Vantage Point, and Michelle. And I'm going to pass it off to Michelle to talk a little bit about herself and Vantage Point. So Michelle, take it away.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So I need to share my screen.
Yes, and I'm
Yeah.
going to go off screen.
Okay. So I'm hoping everybody can see what I'm seeing.
Looks good.
So welcome. I'm thrilled to be here with you today talking about this topic that I'm super passionate about. And my company, Vantage Point Performance, has been researching and doing work in this area now for over 14 years. So the topic today of sales coaching, what it is, what it isn't, and what it could be, is a really critical one. But we can't look at sales coaching in isolation. We really have to take a look at what is it, how does it happen within the context of the sales organization? What are some reasons why it's not happening? And then kind of clarify the best path forward to enable our sales managers in ways that work. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is this sales execution challenge. And the challenge is that if you're a sales leader, if you're a VP of sales, you know that if you do a great job and get your entire organization to quota, which almost never happens, but if you hit your targets, what happens to the size of your target next year, right? It goes up. And that happens year over year over year. And at the same time that targets are increasing, the percentage of sellers at quota has been in a pretty steady decline. And what organizations do to help solve this problem is they do things like adding new dashboards so that we can very clearly and closely track the KPIs that matter. They invest in, CRMs and other tools within the sales tech stack. They even train their salespeople, and they look to formalize sales processes. They do a lot of other things, but these are some of the primary things they do. And when they do this, they make a very powerful yet scary assumption. And they assume that the sales manager, the person that's leading the sales team, intuitively knows how to put all of these tools together and leverage them all in a way that's going to lead to better salesperson performance. And yet, we know that the percentage of sellers at quota is hovering at about 52%, right? So there's a lot of things that organizations do to help drive better sales performance, but the key lever that impacts sales performance the most is the sales manager. And there's just a lot of noise around the sales manager. So we know that they're important. We know that they have a huge impact on how our salespeople perform and what they execute. We also know from a study that Vantage Point did with the Sales Management Association that when companies invest in sales managers, it makes a difference. So we did a study where we examined the types of training that organizations were providing, the investments they make in training, the topics that are most important to train. And in this first piece of data, what you'll see is on the y-axis, you'll see company performance against their goal. And on the x-axis, you'll see the percent of the sales training budget allocated to sales manager training. And the first thing you'll see is the companies that invest less than 25% of their sales training budget in sales manager training, they're hovering about at their target. For companies that invest between 25 and 50% of their sales training budget in sales managers, they exceeded their goal or their target by 6%. And it only gets better. Companies that invest more than 50% of their sales training budget in preparing their sales managers and leaders exceeded their targets by 15%. So pretty good news about the fact that if you do train your sales managers, you're likely to get a pretty good ROI on that. So when it comes to training, we know that the most typical topic is sales coaching. We also know that sales coaching is important. When we asked these companies that we queried with the Sales Management Association, which topics are most important for you when training your sales managers, coaching was at the very top of the list. So companies think it's important. And companies that invest a larger amount of their budget in sales management training do better. Yet when we look across the board in some of our deeper studies, what we find is that although coaching is important and sales manager training is important, we still had 75% of managers having less than half of their sellers at quota. So these types of numbers are kind of scary, right? And we're going to share with you and unpack some findings from a couple of studies that we did, particularly two studies. And those two studies were published in our most recent book, Crushing Quota, which is sort of a companion to our original book, Cracking the Sales Management Code. So Crushing Quota really is all about what are the actual practices, coaching and management practices that the highest performing managers engage in, and why does that make a difference? So the two studies, the two primary studies that we conducted that informed this book, the first one was about which type of coaching that managers perform actually has the biggest impact on salesperson performance. And we're talking about objective salesperson performance, quota attainment. And we looked at some other elements as well. What's the complexity of the sale? What's the complexity of the product they're selling? And then the second study took a very detailed look at sales coaching practices, specifically around how they coach to account management, territory management, opportunity management, and call management. And we took a look at what are these individual practices that managers engage in, and how do those individual coaching practices impact salesperson performance. And so some pretty interesting things came out of this study. In the first place, when we took a look at manager performance against revenue targets, as you might imagine, the top 25% of managers generated significantly more revenue than the bottom 25%. In fact, 39% more revenue, which really isn't shocking. What's really interesting here is if you look at this sort of the middle of the pack here, this would be considered the core, the middle 50% of managers, they were hovering right about at quota. So you might look at this and say, well, it's not really a bad news picture because 75% of the managers are roughly at or above quota. And you might get the wrong impression. You might think, oh, things are all rosy. But if you look at a different metric, it tells a different story. When we looked at the percentage of sellers at quota for these different groups, you can see that the bottom 25% and the middle 50% had almost the same percentage of sellers at quota. So what was happening to get these core performers, these middle group at quota or almost at target, they were over-relying on a few high-performing sellers to get them there. Contrast that with the top 25% who actually got 35% more of their sellers to quota. So we know that sales managers are the key. And in summary, the top 25% of managers exceeded their targets by 15%. The bottom 25% of managers fell short by 24%. And what we also know is that top 25%, they generated on average $3.5 million per year per manager. So we know that effective sales coaching and management practices matter. They have a big impact. But a lot of managers aren't engaging with them, which is why so few sellers are making it to quota. So let's take a look at the sales manager's world. Let's take a look at it from the view of sales leadership at the top level, and then we'll take a look at the realities that managers face. So if I'm a VP of sales and I'm looking at my frontline sales managers, I might see things a little bit differently because I might have made decisions that are designed to help that manager, right? I may have put in dashboards and got very specific types of reporting. I've given them sales tools. I've trained their sales people. And so it looks pretty rosy. But when you look at it from the sales manager's perspective, a very different pattern emerges, or a very different picture emerges. Sales managers have a ton of pressure exerted on them on a daily basis. They got their sales reps who are constantly needing help, helping them do proposals, helping them go on sales calls, helping them solve problems. They got their sales leader, examining how the deals are going, when they're going to close certain deals, demanding the forecast. We've got HR deploying competency models, expecting sales managers to coach to those models. We've got sales operations wanting to drive higher adoption of the sales tools and trying to get managers to be a little bit more inspection driven around the use of the tools. We've got marketing who wants sales teams focused on certain products or certain campaigns. And we've got customers, those pesky customers who have demands as well, right? They have issues that need resolving. So when you add this all up, you end up with a manager who has way more to do than they have time and way more distractions than they can effectively manage. So how bad is it being a frontline sales manager? Well, if you're on this meeting, this webinar today, it's really hard. And there was a time study actually done by a gentleman named Adam Rapp. And he took a look at the different activities that managers engage in, the amount of time they spend on those different activities. So when we consider the chaos that sales managers face, these findings become a little bit less surprising. I'd like to orient you to this one area on the right up top of the screen where it says 32.1%. That's the amount of time in Adam Rapp's study that managers were actually spending managing their team. Only 32% of their time. And coaching is only some small percentage of that 32%. So because the manager's environment has so many distractions, because it's so chaotic, they don't spend nearly as much time as they'd like to actually coaching their teams. So I'm going to unpack a few of the research findings that I think might be rather surprising to you about sales coaching. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and run a poll. So our first poll is about, do you believe that successful sales managers spend more time coaching each seller per month versus everyone else? So let's go ahead and launch the poll if we could. So do you believe that's true, or do you believe that's false? Do high-performing sales managers coach more hours than their less effective peers? So Angelica, how's the poll going? Are we getting some good responses? Why don't we go ahead and post it? Do we have enough that we can actually share the results? Okay, so Angelica, why don't you show us our results? Did people believe that successful sales managers spent more time coaching or not?
Hi, Michelle. In order for me to share the poll, we have to stop sharing the screen.
Okay.
Awesome. Let me share the results.
Interesting. Okay, so overwhelmingly, the folks in the audience felt like the most successful managers spend more time coaching each seller. Well, guess what? That's actually not true. I'm going to share some results with you because we thought the same thing. That was a hypothesis that we had going into this research, and that's not actually what happened. So I'm going to stop the poll for the sharing of the poll, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, so if you'll take a look at, you'll see the poll, and then what you'll see is the results from our study. So, and this was not unique to our study. We have validated this finding again and again and again in different companies. In almost every case, the bottom 75% report coaching more hours than the top 25%. And you might be thinking to yourself, that's crazy. I can't really believe that's true, but it is. And we were shocked by it. So of course we had to dig deeper and find out they're not coaching more, then what are they doing differently? And we're going to be sharing those insights over the next few webinars that we do on this topic. So one of the studies that we did that I mentioned before, we examined these 3 types of sales coaching. We examined capability coaching, which is really all about, skills and knowledge. We examined outcome coaching, which is really more about the degree to which sellers are hitting their targets. And we examined activity coaching, which is, really driving seller behavior and actions. So before I give you the results of this, I'm going to ask again for your opinion, your perception. So which type of coaching do you believe has the biggest impact on quota attainment? Capability coaching, outcome coaching, or activity coaching? So Angelica, if you could go ahead and launch that next poll, that would be wonderful. So which type of coaching has the biggest impact on quota attainment? Capability, outcome, or activity coaching? Okay, how are we doing, Angelica?
Really good. If you want to stop sharing, I can share the results.
Yep.
Awesome. Let's see the results.
So 24%. I can't see on my screen, I can't see the percentage of the activity, but it must be a much larger percentage.
So the capability coaching, we got 24%, outcome coaching, 8%, and activity coaching at 68%.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I'm going to give you some of the results, which I think are pretty fascinating. So what you share with me so far in this poll is that most of you believe that activity coaching is the most powerful and connected to quota, but a pretty large amount of you felt that capability coaching was the most powerful. Let's take a look at the results. So on the y-axis, you're going to see impact on quota attainment. And on the x-axis, you'll see the different types of coaching training or coaching that managers were providing. So one of our hypotheses going into this was that capability coaching would be strongly, significantly, and positively correlated with quota attainment. But guess what? Almost zero impact. 2%. Capability coaching had a 2% impact on the variation in quota attainment. So we were stunned by that. Outcome coaching, which got very little attention in the poll, had a 10% impact on quota attainment, or the variance in quota attainment, but it still wasn't significant. Only activity coaching was positively and significantly related to objective quota attainment. And so that's a huge finding. And that really agrees with a lot of what you felt in the poll. The only difference is capability coaching, which is actually quite commonly trained within organizations, doesn't really have an impact. So the way managers are trained is not aligned with these findings. So a lot of training that managers receive is oriented more around the capability coaching. So they get training on competency models and how to assess their sellers against these competency models. Then there's a lot of other trainings they receive, like the GROW model and situational leadership, which are more general leadership trainings, really all designed to hit capability coaching. When we think about forecasting and pipeline formality, that's typically how managers manage to outcomes, right? So think about the forecasting process, the scrubbing of the pipeline. That's really all about outcomes. And those processes are typically highly formal in organizations. Really, when we think about this idea of forecasting and pipeline scrubbing, that's really more about inspecting rather than coaching. And I've put another chart up here that I want to draw your attention to. What you'll see here is that on the y-axis, it's a percentage of coaching time that's spent on inspection. And on the y-axis, you'll see, or the x-axis, you'll see the different performance groups. What you'll notice is that the highest performers spend by far the least amount of coaching time doing inspection, so that they can orient more of their coaching time to coaching activities that are sort of forward-facing and more around seller activities. So the big question is, how do we coach to sales activities, right? And does that really matter? Before we do that, what I'd like to find out from you is, what type of coaching training have you received? Have you received training on coaching to capabilities, coaching to outcomes, or coaching to activities? So why don't we go ahead, Angelica, and launch the next poll?
All right, we're getting some answers coming in.
Perfect.
Looks like it's going steady. More people are interacting on the poll. You just let me know if you want me to show the results, Michelle.
I will. Are we getting lots of responses?
We're getting a lot of responses, yep.
I think we're ready?
I think we're ready, yeah.
All right, let me stop sharing. You can show the poll.
All right, let's share it. So capability coaching at 38.24%. And then next, outcome coaching at 26.46%, and activity coaching at 35.29%.
Okay. So again, the highest percentage are aimed at capability coaching, which in the research has the smallest impact on actual quota attainment. What's encouraging is the second highest area is activity coaching. So let's stop sharing the poll, and I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And what I'd like to do is, for sort of one of our final topics, I'd like to share with you how companies get this wrong. When we train managers to activities, what are some of the ways that we get it wrong? So when you think about seller training, the most prevalent type of training that managers receive has to do with the training their sellers receive. For example, sellers might get training on how to conduct sales calls. They might get training on how to pursue opportunities. They might get training on how to manage major accounts. Now, in addition to the training, they get tools that go along with the training. But not only that, then the managers get a little extra training on how do I coach my people to prepare for sales calls using these tools? How do I coach my people to pursue opportunities using these tools? How do I coach my people to better manage these accounts using these tools? So they get these little sort of spot trainings that are aligned to very specific methodologies. Now, when you think about how that impacts a sales manager in their real world, remember we said managers live in a world full of chaos that includes all of the pressures that are exerted on them on a regular basis, plus the CRM, plus the dashboards. Then you layer on all of these additional tools and the training that goes along with those. Then you layer on some of the generic sales management training that they receive. And then we wonder, why are they not using the training that we deployed? Why are they not using the tools that we deployed? Because we deploy all of these things to help the sales managers, but we don't necessarily help them understand when do I use which thing and how do I use it and how do I incorporate that into the realities of my day-to-day job. So in the next 2 webinars that we do with Modern Sales Pros, we're going to dig into the very specific practices that the highest performing managers engage in order to drive higher levels of performance. And let's summarize some of the key takeaways from our discussion today. So coaching to activities has an outsized impact on quota attainment, far more powerful than coaching to capabilities or focusing on, lagging indicators and results. We also know that conventional wisdom about effective coaching is often incorrect. I asked you the question, do the highest performing sales managers coach their sellers for more hours per month? The answer was no. We were surprised by that, but we found out what they do differently. They don't coach more, they coach differently. So effective coaching does not necessarily equal more coaching. It involves different coaching. It also pays to invest in your sales managers, in developing them. Companies who spend more on sales manager development perform better, right? And finally, sales management training must reflect their real world and help simplify their job, not make it harder, which unfortunately, a lot of the training they receive makes their job harder. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it back over to you, Angelica, and see if we have any questions in the chat or just open it up for questions.
Yeah, there's no Q&As, but definitely, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to add your questions in the Q&A function, and we'll be sure to answer it live.
Excellent. So, Angelica, what you'll also notice is on this slide that I'm sharing, you'll see there's a couple of ways that folks can interact with VantagePoint, right? Mm-hmm. They can reach out to me directly if they have questions about the research or anything that I shared today. They can email me the name of the person in their company who makes these sorts of decisions. And we're actually going to do a drawing after these 3 webinars to then determine which company gets a complimentary diagnostic, sales manager diagnostic.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I hope everyone takes advantage of that. We do actually have some Q&As that are coming through. Okay. Adriana is asking, can we share the last key takeaways again? Do a little recap again.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yes, we can.
Yeah,
so let's go back to these key takeaways. So, and I'm going to send this slide deck, and all of you that are on this webinar will get a copy of this slide deck as well. So coaching to activities has an outsized impact on performance. 24% of the variance in quota attainment was attributed to activity coaching. It was the only type of the 3 types of coaching that had a positive and significant impact on quota attainment. Conventional wisdom about effective coaching is often wrong. An example of that is the highest performing managers don't coach more than low performing managers. They actually coach less. They just coach differently. When companies invest in developing their sales managers, the more they invest, the higher their revenue attainment. And for sales management training to be effective, it's got to relate to their day-to-day job. They have to be able to see very clearly how what you're teaching them makes what they do day in and day out better, more effective, and easier, not harder. So do we have any
Awesome.
other questions?
We do. Daryl is asking, aside from quota attainment, what other metrics can you align to sales coaching impact?
So that's an interesting question. We have not studied retention. However, we have seen over time when managers coach in these ways, they experience less turnover. When we work with organizations to enable their entire sales management team, we have seen decreases in turnover in the sales force. So that's another pretty big impact of effective coaching, because people don't leave companies, they leave managers, is what happens.
Terry is asking, when you talk about behaviors, are you referring to things like persistence, perseverance, resourcefulness, and self-discipline?
Well, to some degree, yes, but those really are more attributes that help salespeople succeed and keep going, because there's a lot of rejection. When we talk about behaviors, we're really talking about the behaviors that are necessary to coach the activities that matter most. So, for example, if new account acquisition is really critical to a particular sales force, we would look at activities such as effective prospecting. We would look at effective message development. And there are certain behaviors that go into effective prospecting and effective message development. So we look at the behaviors that are aligned with the activities that matter most and align sales manager coaching to those activities, which will in turn impact the behaviors that are needed to drive effective execution of those activities.
Awesome. And Mark asked a really great question. Many sales managers struggle getting their team to use the CRM properly. What type of coaching would that fall into? Capabilities, outcomes, or activity, or all three?
I think that really falls into activity coaching and outcome coaching more than anything. And I'll tell you why. Because if a manager's coaching to outcomes, they're going to be looking at a rep's pipeline, they're going to be evaluating close rates, et cetera. And if they're doing opportunity coaching around, say, a specific deal, they're going to be utilizing the information within that CRM to do that. I'm going to give you a quick story that illuminates the importance of holding sellers accountable. I had a sales manager within GE, because we work with GE for many years. And that sales manager was very frustrated by the level of adoption, the level of usage of Salesforce.com, which was their CRM. And I actually observed this sales manager in action. And the sales manager had the CRM instance up on their computer. The sales rep did not. The sales rep didn't even have notes or anything with them. And as the sales manager and the salesperson were talking, the manager was updating the CRM. And when the coaching conversation was done, I said, so why do you think you have an issue with Salesforce, with CRM utilization? He said, I really don't know. And I said, well, who was updating the CRM during the coaching conversation? Was it you or was it the salesperson? And they said, well, it was me. And I said, is that a typical practice for you? He goes, yeah, I do that with every coaching conversation. I said, well, why don't we ask the salesperson to update it prior to the coaching conversation and pull up their instance of the CRM so they can walk you through it? Mm-hmm. I said, that alone would have a really big impact. So little things that managers do, little habits they have, really make differences. And requiring for sellers to update their opportunities that they're going to discuss prior to the coaching conversation is a very small request, but it has a pretty big impact.
Absolutely. I know we are 3 minutes over, but we have another great question that we'll end off with. Have you looked at win rates as an indication of coaching performance improvement?
We have. In fact, I'll go back to GE because we have a case study on GE. When we worked with their entire sales management team to establish more consistent activity coaching, specifically early stage opportunity qualification, within 18 months, we saw their close rates of forecasted revenue more than double. More than double. And it's because they were paying attention to the earlier stages of the deals, which meant sellers were pursuing deals that were more winnable, better qualified. It actually reduced the size of their pipeline initially because they were keeping a lot of the fluff out. But the dramatic impact that the right type of coaching has on win rates is significant. And it just requires pretty small changes, but consistent changes. And in this case, it involved shifting about 50% of their coaching discussions to the early stage deals versus late stage deals. And that alone was primarily responsible for the huge improvement in close rates.
Amazing. That is
Yeah.
amazing metrics and data. Well, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We love having you here. And thank you, Michelle, for the wonderful, engaging session. I'm actually going to add your LinkedIn here. I know you added your email. I'll also include that in the email that everyone is going to receive along with the recording today. And please be sure to check out Vantage Performance. I'll add the link right here. Again, the key takeaways and the slide and the recording will be made available before end of day, and everyone will be receiving it. And again, if you have colleagues that could not make it today, please share it with them, and we'll also be sending them a copy of the recording as well. Thank you so much again, and thank you, Michelle. And please stay tuned for the next 2 events that we're going to have with Michelle coming up in the next few months.
Thanks so much. Take care,
Have a great
everyone.
day, everyone.